It's a pleasure to be back at Latitude59 here this morning and to be with my two distinguished guests. Let's meet them. Former President of Estonia, Toomas Hendrik Ilves, welcome. And Volt Europa co-founder Damian Boeselager, welcome also. Quick introductions, but Toomas, a man who almost needs no introduction here in Estonia. You were the fourth president of Estonia from 2006 to 2016, instrumental in putting Estonia on the map. You led negotiations to join the EU, raised Estonia's voice and profile on the global stage, and led Estonia to, and its talent, to becoming the nation that it's known to, the destination for founders and the unicorn factory that it is today. Welcome. Damian Boeselager, co-founder of Volt Europa, which is a transnational pro-European political movement. Volt was born in 2017, post-Brexit, when you and your co-founders decided that you wanted a new approach to European politics out there. You have a pan-European manifesto encouraging citizens to rethink and shape their politics in their cities, countries, nations, and to solve pan-European challenges, which is exactly what we're going to be talking about today. How can we solve some of these challenges for founders and for Europe? Now, Volt has already scaled 30 countries today, if I've understood correctly. You have 5 Volt members who have been elected into the European Parliament. And Toomas, you are now also a member of Volt from earlier this year, May, if I understood correctly. Yes. Okay, welcome. Should we find out a little bit about our audience here? So we've got 2 established founders on stage. How many founders do we have in our audience? Raise your hands, please, if you're a founder. If you're an entrepreneur, if you're a startup. Okay, yeah, got a few of them. How about if you are an investor? You're a VC, you're an angel. Hands up. Few of those. Okay, also. How about if you're working in the public sector, in government? Okay, all right. So, today, whether you are leading a country, you are leading a company or a movement in Europe, we're all facing similar challenges. Okay. This is about how do we protect our citizens? How do we protect our borders? How do we protect our clients, our market share, our stakeholders, our foreign policies, our culture, integrity, our laws, our values? The context is even more urgent. So, Toomas, let's come to one of the biggest challenges that everyone faces out there, which is finance and investment, funding for technology and innovation. What is your perspective on how the challenges and restrictions that European founders face, and how can we bring these barriers down? How can we make Europe an easier place to build and scale companies?
Well, from my experience over the years, really what has led to the stagnation in innovation in Europe compared to both Silicon Valley and also China is that we have a completely fractured financial market in Europe. I mean, what we need is a united capital market so that which right now is not really possible. I mean, we just have to, this is something which has been talked about for years and years. I think that it's our current political situation internationally with an ever-increasing China and with a rather unpredictable United States, and even hostile, I would say, toward Europe in the last 4 months, that unless we get moving on this, we will completely fall behind when it comes to tech, which leads to then, of course, the security issue, which is that so much of security in the 21st century is based on technology. I mean, it used to be iron and before that mules and cannons, but today mean, security really is fundamentally a technology question. And if we fall behind the technology, we rely on foreign technology. Well, I mean, people in Europe don't want to rely on Chinese technology, but now we see the United States cutting off, say, Maxar, which provided Ukraine battlefield maps in real time. Okay, they can do that. Then you see cutting other cutoffs from the United States in the tech realm that we have to really start worrying about our own security. If we don't produce these things ourselves, we're going to be at other people's mercy.
Certainly, in terms of doing business cross-border here in Europe, it's a struggle, it's a challenge. A unified market here would definitely help us. And we're going to talk about
capital market. We already have a
single market, but a capital market, definitely. But you mentioned the defense and security. We're going to talk about that in just a second. But I want to talk about the economy and how can we defend our economy also. Because as Christine Lagarde actually said, she raised it. She's the president of the European Central Bank. Raised the question about, well, what happens if the US decides to turn off Visa and MasterCard for us? So our European economies and many of our businesses, our citizens, our livelihood are dependent on this. So, Damian, what strategies, what tactics could we take to both protect and support European businesses?
Yeah, maybe I'll start with the support and the united capital market. I think it's clear, there are many reports from Letta and Draghi and so on, that we have a huge investment gap. And the question is a bit, where can this money come from? Either it's public money and we don't have a lot of that and it will be less on the European level due to the economic situation, or it's unlocking private capital. On the private capital side, I think where we are really lacking is innovation capital or venture capital. So how can you increase the amount of venture capital that goes cross-border? I mean, there are many ways to look at it. I think tax incentives play an important role, but there's also the whole question of, do we need bigger pension funds in Europe that can invest also cross-border? I think if you are a startup in Europe, it's likely that 70% of your capital just still comes from within your own nation. So that's something I think where we have a huge potential and we need to work on unlocking that further. On your question on payments, I mean, there are studies that say if Visa, MasterCard and maybe Amex are turned off, there's a short-term risk of 16% of GDP. Short-term. Yeah, it will shift, the payments will go elsewhere, but there's a short-term risk there. So the question is a bit, how can we get around it? And there is the idea of the digital euro payment system. So basically, that as you can pay in cash, you would also have a digital version of that, which would allow some sovereignty on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually quite, we've had the European Central Bank digital currency sort of talked about for years, but it hasn't gone anywhere. On the innovation and investment side, I mean, what I've seen in my own country, I remember the last year I was president, there was a young guy, he was 22, I read in the newspaper, he got in a small investment in his company when he was in the university. So that kind of thing that I would try to promote, I called him in and I said, well, congratulations, this is great. And he said, yeah, well, I'm sorry, but I'm moving to the United States in 2 weeks. I said, why are you doing that? He goes, well, you can't get any real investment in Europe. And so he did that, and 5 months later, he'd already gotten, I think, $5 million invested into a startup, and 3 years later, he sold it for $100 million. I mean, we lost this one person, and I think I'm sure it just repeats over and over again. And in fact, if you look at all of the unicorns we have in this country that we're so proud of, basically, they've all gotten their initial, or they've gotten the investments that allowed them to take off from Sand Hill Road in Silicon Valley, not from Estonia, not from Europe.
Just one little comment on this. I think the fact is that we lack especially also the growth capital, so ticket sizes of 100 million. And the question is, why is that? And I talked to an SAP finance, so to the CFO, and he said they have a huge investment fund also for growth capital, and they can invest anywhere. And where do they go? They go to the US. And he put it back on what you called, the single market. He said it's very difficult still to scale. So if I have a scaling fund in Europe, and I don't know if it's possible to scale that easily, I'm not going to invest there. And then, of course, on the exit side, the question is our stock exchange big enough, or do we need a chess boxing game of Macron and Merz where they fight whether it should be in Frankfurt or in Paris or whatever, and then it's finally done. Yeah? But I think it's a bit of a question of both the path of the scaling as well as the exit options that make it a bit difficult to attract this capital here, even though we have it. Yeah?
The other thing we need to do is that
we are horrible panelists. I'm sorry.
I'm going to have to interrupt them, aren't I?
I mean, the other side of this. Last year, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency in the United States, known as DARPA, which has given the world everything from, the internet before that, email, Velcro, all these things that come out of DARPA. They invested $4.5 billion into basic research. The European Union equivalent of DARPA invested $250 million.
Yes.
That gives you an idea of the massive difference in the degree to which we support.
And yet there are funds here, there are mechanisms here, and we know, just as you said, DARPA is a great example, NASA is another example of how investment in research, defense, cyber research, not only strengthens the economy, but leads later down the years to new consumer tech, products, hardware, services, all of these things. So what are some of the rules and the policies that need to change in order for us to be able to unlock European investments, or to make it easier for startups to actually access and use the European funds that are on the table?
I think the first thing is the importance to understand that we are really lagging behind. And I just give you one more data point, which is, I think, important. The US, over the last 50 years, registered, I think, 200 companies with a market cap of 10 billion euros on their stock exchanges. In Europe, it's 14. And in Germany, it's 2. I don't know how many in Estonia. So the understanding that, and these are not any companies. It's Google. It's what's the company with the chips called again? Nvidia. And so, these are definitely the future drivers. So the question is, do we understand that just maintaining the current businesses with public cash very often, like the car industry in Germany and others, do we understand that this is not enough, but that we need to shift? Because the opportunity cost of missing out on new innovation is so high that we need to shift the limited resources we have in this direction. So I just like to have this as a priority, I think is the first. Okay, but let's be more precise. What do you have to do? I think we need to get 5% of pension funds to go and invest in venture capital, and it is actually legally possible. We checked with the regulation Solvency II, but people don't do it. The other problem is that our pension systems are too much transfer-based in many countries, which means we don't have these huge institutional investors. That's also something we need to change, also to make our pension systems actually tenable over the long term.
So we have the funding, but we need to change our mindset and our mechanisms to be able to actually put this into practice, put this into use.
Well, the result is this, which is that in Europe, 80% of investment comes from banks, 20% from private equity. In the United States, is the reverse. 20% of investment is from banks and 80% from private equity. Now, what does that mean in real life? Can you imagine 1975, sort of a long-haired Steve Jobs goes to Deutsche Bank and says, well, I have this idea with my friend Woz, and we're like building something we call a personal computer. We don't know if we'll call it an apple or an apricot or something. He'd be thrown out of the bank in 15 seconds, right? Oh, but he was in a place where private equity said, oh, well, we can check it out. Let's give him some money. That is the absence or the fear of risk in any form is a cultural mental issue that we can get over only when this actually becomes possible to get private equity to easily move.
Definitely. Now, investment is one thing. We've already talked about a number of different recommendations and things that need to change. But The finance alone is not enough to create a great competitive organization. You need the talent as well. And this is something that has been a struggle for many founders here in Europe. What's your take on how Europe can not only retain its homegrown talent, but attract international talent? Toomas, there you gave us the story about the young founder. So what needs to change in order for us to be able to keep and attract talent here in Europe?
Well, I said, I mean, there are so many stories of people who are brilliant and they're in Europe, but it goes nowhere here, or they can't get the kind of funding they need, the kind of investment, and whereas they know in the United States is possible. And of course, the United States really makes it easy for them to come over and do something. So, I mean, on the one hand, if you can do it here, then you tend to stay here. And secondly, we also can be much more open in terms of bringing people here. We have a unique opportunity right now, frankly, in what's happened in the United States in the last 4 months, where, I mean, you see massive amounts of scientists being let go for reasons no one quite understands. But, I mean, just think of NIH, just lost about 3,000 people. Universities are laying off leading scientists because the money has dried up. They're not taking new graduate students. Now, if we look back historically, I mean, in the 30s and 40s, with the rise of authoritarianism in Europe, I mean, the great minds that went there, I mean, I counted 7 PhDs or later, rather than a PhD, 7 Nobel Prize winners, either before or then after World War II, came from Europe fleeing authoritarianism. We had cultural figures, Thomas Mann, Hannah Arendt, Vladimir Nabokov, all of them. I mean, so it's not only scientists, but maybe we can sort of get back the people that we lost because of the bad decisions of the 1930s and 40s. But certainly, we already see France and Germany with their own programs on making it easier for scientists, natural scientists, physical scientists, to come to their universities. I think what we actually need is to simplify across Europe residence and work permit possibilities based on something like a points system to bring the skilled talent that right now, frankly, in the United States is, very often is without a job.
Mm-hmm. And make it easier, not just for the researchers and the scientists, but for all the sectors, as you said, that we need.
That's what I said. I mean, yes. Thomas Mann, Hannah Arendt, I mean, they're like significant figures in the world for what they did in literature or in philosophy. Well, I mean,
all of those people that we have, the current potential here in Europe, the future Nobel Prize winners, keep them here, bring the others in. Damian, I believe that Volt, you're actually doing some things and some actions already to try and attract US talent over here to Europe. What are you guys up to?
Yes, so we launched a campaign, but it was sadly only an April Fool's joke, where we basically said, this guy doesn't want you, and then a big image of Donald Trump with the American hat from, we want you, this kind of thing, and then basically trying to say, but we do, and then put my dream would be, and it's a bit difficult from a government perspective, but my dream would be that one of you actually pays for these huge posters in Silicon Valley and in New York saying, hey, we want you to come. So talk to me later if you feel interested in this. But I think to maybe add a couple of points. The first one is narrative. Maybe, we thought that maybe we should engage you also a bit. So who thinks that in their country there's currently a positive debate about migration?
Ooh, I don't see a single hand.
So how we currently in Europe debate about migration is not only toxic and often racist, it's also economically extremely stupid. I think that's the first thing that we need to understand. Secondly, if you immigrate into a European country, you don't immigrate into a European labor market. You basically immigrate into a country's labor market. So let's say you go to Bulgaria, you have a job for 2 years, then you don't like it anymore, you want to go somewhere else. Not so easy. You have to reapply for the visa. So we are already quite not so attractive. Even under the first Trump administration, the US was more attractive for international talent that wanted to go somewhere than the EU. Also our languages. I love our languages, we shouldn't get rid of them, but we need to compensate a bit with other things, like the freedom to move also for labor migrants. And we are building also something in the European Union right now, which is called the EU Talent Pool, where we basically, it's a Tinder to match international workforce with European vacancies to somehow make it work better. And I think we really need to up that game. Also, if you look at demographics and again, pension systems, we really need to up our game massively. And as you said, it's driving. We have a recent report. I mean, 15, 20, 30% of founders in our countries have a migrant background. And I think we really need to value that contribution much more.
Okay. Talking about upping our game, there's one word that we've not yet mentioned here on stage, surprisingly, AI. Somewhere where we're also lagging here in Europe and we need to up our game. In your opinion, both, what is holding us back?
Same thing. I mean, when all these tech bros in Silicon Valley are each putting $100 billion into AI, and I mean, you look at what's happening here. Basically, there only are two AI superpowers. I mean, there's China and the United States. And they're the ones investing massively in this. We're not. And I mean, I guess we have to, I mean, unless there's a massive change, we're going to have to sort of basically try to figure out how to do things differently, because we won't be able to develop the AI. But we can be very creative in developing the solutions using AI. I mean, I always bring the example of you know, the rather remarkable system we have in Estonia, which we have a secure identity based on a chip already from the year 2000. Well, the chip was around since 1975 and could have been used for two-factor authentication, end-to-end encryption, and all those things that lie at the basis of a secure identity. But no one did. I mean, no one did. So we just said, oh, we could use this for that. And that became the basis of e-governance here, that because where the sine qua non is a secure, unique identity. We can do the same thing with AI, coming up with interesting solutions that they haven't come up with. And I mean, just personally, I lived 4 years after I finished my presidency in Palo Alto, and of course that's the world center of innovation in tech, which is great. I mean, so I went there. But when I tried to register my child to go to school, basically, it could have been the 1950s. I mean, everything was paper-based. I had to provide all these documents, which the bureaucrat there took all of these things that I needed to get her registered, and went to another room and photocopied everything, came back, and then by hand started filling out some form. Now, I mean, that didn't exist in Estonia, has not existed in Estonia after basically 2002. And you're like, okay, well, we came up with solutions to issues which even the most advanced tech capital in the world has not done.
Well, I think this is it, because you don't need to always be out there actually creating the next best thing. It's how can you then actually take that and harness it in a way that's right for your country, for your market. When I think about AI here, it is, as you said, it's the China and the US that is leading it, but it's how can we then actually bring and create an environment that is right for us here. One of the things that I think about when I think about AI, maybe many of you also, is the energy consumption. Okay, and I think that's something that within Europe as well, energy is something that's actually we've struggled with a little bit recently, and is certainly driving up the costs. And as a founder, as a startup, it's not just the investment that's required, it's the cost of doing business also. So when it comes to driving innovation, Damian, other European countries, often we look to our local, let's say, the giants in there, the established organizations, to how to drive an innovation sector like AI forwards, maybe the Siemens or the DES or the Thales out there. Is this the right approach to look into how we can drive European innovation in AI and unlock European AI use?
I think innovation within established companies is, of course, super important. And there are many ways how to somehow bridge innovation outside these companies with what's happening inside, and I think there are campuses for that and so on. But my argument from before was that we have neglected the innovation outside the established players for far too long. And for that, I mean, also thinking from our own founding journey, we established a bit like a cycle of what you need. So first you need a great idea. Okay, so this we can do via having great universities. We're not so bad on that when it comes to patents. The second thing is you need cash. We talked about the Capital Markets Union. There are other ways, also public money. You talked about DARPA, which also means procurement. So maybe the state and the EU should work more via procurement as well. You need people, talent. For that, we talked about immigration, but there's also something about activation of our market that we have here, or labor that we have here, for example, female participation, but also cross-border EU hiring. Super difficult still to hire from Estonia someone in Palermo. I see you nodding. So it's super difficult because you have a tax base.
How many of you have had challenges with that?
Cross-border hiring?
Cross-border hiring.
Did anyone have a challenge with that?
Yeah, there's a few hands going up there, yeah.
So then the next one is compliance, the cost of doing business, as you said. And I mean, there's a lot we can do. I always, of course, when you say in Estonia, this has been done since 2002, I look back at Germany. We currently have the second law modernizing our community, like commune level data. And I think the forecast is that they will be done with just the file digitization. We didn't talk about the software to run that by 2100. Just like if you, Anyways, but there's something we can do on the EU Inc. I don't know if you have heard about this. The EU Inc. is the idea of like basically establishing a 28th system next to the systems that we have nationally to, at least for corporate law, unify a bit the way that you can register your company, and there are other things that we can do with it. Then you have infrastructure. Infrastructure, I think, is also the data infrastructure. It's the streets, it's your train system from here to go to, let's say, Lisbon. But I think on the data side, the reliance or over-reliance on, again, third country providers is massive. Yeah, I mean, I think data spaces, 80% of the market share is with Google, Azure, and AWS. And there's just some things that we need to potentially look into in terms of resilience. And then the last one is fair competition. And here I think we have an issue with China and the investments that are really state investments into individual companies. And we don't really know how to deal with that from an industrial policy perspective yet.
Okay, we've been discussing about technical, legal, economic issues that we face. I just want to throw one more thing in here, is that we can't afford to fall behind. We are living in a far more dangerous world than we have lived in since 89-91. I mean, 89-91, everything became wonderful, the peace dividend, we didn't spend on defense. We all thought that everything was going to be wonderful. What have we seen? I mean, first of all, we saw basically, the collapse of the post-World War II order, which forbade invasions and aggression. In 89 or 90, the U.S. and a coalition went and went into Kuwait to push out Saddam Hussein for invading a sovereign country. Here we are. We're already almost 11 years since we saw the first post-World War II case of aggression. Nothing has been done on that. We see an aggressive Russia, which basically, we don't know. We have to think about it. If they win this war or when this war is over, they're going to have 1 million people with PTSD coming back from the front, and they have a war economy that is only geared towards producing war material. What are they going to do after that? It's like maybe, they can't solve that problem, so the only way to keep it going is to keep having a war. And then we have across the Atlantic, we have a Europhobic general attitude, certainly on the part of the vice president and the president and the cabinet and the Congress. We're looked upon with bizarre disdain. I don't understand why, but here we are. We cannot really count on the United States the way we have ever since 1945. And we are not sure, I mean, we cannot really be secure about Russia because everyone thought, this was all, la la land, peace, love, dove, democracy, no more communism, but look at what's happening. And then we have on top of that a rising China that we all worry about. Well, what happens if they take a clue from Crimea and Ukraine and decide to invade Taiwan? I mean, we are living in a far more dangerous world than we have either for 35 years or, I mean, you can say during the Cold War it was dangerous, but Europe had the security umbrella of a United States-led NATO. We cannot be sure of any of this anymore. And so when you cannot be sure about your own security, then you better start dealing with the things that prevent you from having security, and that happens to be these days in our modern era. I mean, lack of innovation, lack of technology, inefficient economies. So it's not simply this, we're not having a theoretical discussion on what would be good in to make the EU work better economically. We are talking about things that need to be done, and if we don't do them, the whole thing could just fall apart.
The interesting thing is, I have heard, I mean, also I was at the Munich Security Conference when J.D. Vance gave his crazy speech, and even back then, but also before and after, I hear a wake-up call constantly. So it's a bit like we are snoozing constantly a wake-up call. I don't know what's going on, but like I'm a bit bored or afraid by the fact that we are too slow to change systems, to understand that we are not in an incremental change of, it's a bit more competitive now, but that it's a fundamental change to potentially have NATO question, to have these, Russian the full-scale invasion in Ukraine. And I think we really need people to wake up also to this new reality when it comes to defense industry. I mean, we really need to understand that maybe procurement completely separately doesn't make sense. There are efforts now. We need to understand that maybe we have to have more long-term procurement. But also in Europe, I think we have 17 different tank systems of the Leopard class. Yeah. Which is, again, a bit of a madness if you think about it in terms of economy of scale.
A demonstration just right there, as such as the fragmentation that we have. Let's look at maybe one other sector quickly of where we could unify to become stronger, but also more competitive and unlock the boundaries for founders out there. For example, I mean, you mentioned PTSD, but healthcare and MedTech, this is a sector that Europe can effectively have some strength and put some weight in there. One or two recommendations to bring down the barriers for founders there?
I mean, there's no problem with the tech side here. It's, again, as I mentioned earlier, with actually our regulation. Estonia was the first country to have digital prescriptions. I mean, now they're kind of common, but when Finland also did it. And then, so I went to the Finnish president in 2012. I said, look, you have digital prescriptions, we have digital prescriptions. 7 million Finns come visit us every year, and there only are 5 million Finns together, so we get a lot of traffic. In fact, I was stuck in it with the ferry here. So basically what we did was we had the first ever cross-border digital or prescription system, so a Finn could come here and he would, if he got sick or something, he would call his doctor in Finland and his doctor would put in the prescription. He could go to an Estonian pharmacy. All right, well, the idea took off, and then now basically I think it's 12 countries in the EU have interoperable reciprocal digital prescriptions. So I mean, I can go to Croatia, or if I go to far away as Lisbon and I get sick, I can get my Estonian prescription. Now that's just the beginning. I mean, if you think about it, you say, well, it's just digital. I mean, it's no big deal. But would be far better in terms of this integration is, and which is completely doable with the chip. It's all the tech all exists. The block is all in terms of bureaucracy and legislation. So the idea would be to create a medical Schengen. Since all my medical records are digital, if I go to Greece on vacation, I get sick, I go to a Greek doctor, I authorize him to look at my medical records. Now, he's of course Greek. He's not going to be Estonian, But I mean, if he's authorized, he gets my medical records automatically in Greek. And then he can see, oh, okay, you're allergic to that, or you had this thing here, and okay, we have to take it into account. I mean, which would make all of our lives much easier. Now, my main point with that is that there are things we can do. We are not limited by technology in the least, because it's old technology. I mean, stuff from 20 years ago. But we have these legal barriers, and we have political opposition to things that are so utterly sensible that you just can't understand why we don't do it.
I have to quickly comment on this because, of course, Germany is one of the most inhibiting factors to digitization of healthcare. And it comes from the understanding that a state itself can turn evil, where you say, okay, if they know that much about me, like, can they weaponize this? And I think that's actually where, like, originally it comes from. But I do believe
I'll tell you, guys, it's like I hear, oh, Gestapo, Stasi, and I go, hey, KGB? I mean, we had the KGB. Somehow we can get over it, you know, like, get over it.
So maybe this is the trauma.
There's a barrier right there.
This is the trauma lesson you can give us in terms of healthcare, I think. But I do believe that it's also technically possible so easily to make, to actually address these concerns and still have the full functionality. And we are still not doing it because of some like non-founded prejudice. So I'm fully with you.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've had a lot of discussion with Germans on this, and I basically, I think, comes from technological illiteracy, because I argue that your data in this country are more secure and more private than they are in a paper world, where you have no record of who's taking what, where we have a log file of every transaction.
And this is the thing. I mean, if we can make it super secure, but we can't do business and we can't remain competitive on a global market, then how do we secure our economies? How do we secure our citizens? It's very much what we've been doing here this morning in this opening panel, looking at the strategies and the visions for how we can create a more competitive Europe for our businesses and for our citizens. I just want to recap quickly some of the things we've heard. Remind me if I forget anything here. So if you're in the audience, or if you're a founder, if you're a wannabe founder, if you're an investor, if you're a policymaker, we've talked about a single capital market. We've talked about digital euro. Unlocking pension funds, supporting defense tech spending, talent, making it easier to bring talent in, but also for talent then to move around. Damian, you mentioned that point. Also, Damian, you mentioned looking at innovation, European innovation, from the perspective of the startuppers and not just those major organizations. Toomas, Health Schengen, we're just talking about that. Anything else? And then we have 1:30 left.
I would basically say very quickly, and I'll leave it to you. Basically, we are in a serious, there's a serious crisis approaching, and we're pretending it doesn't exist. And as far as I can tell, especially if you're a small country, I mean, if you don't get the European Union solving these issues, then we're, especially given where we sit in Europe and what we're next to, we're in deep shit, excuse me. So we better get moving on Europe fast.
Maybe. I of course I cannot fully feel this, but when the full mobilization in Russia actually happened a bit later after the full-scale invasion, I was on this boat from Helsinki to Tallinn, talking to people, and of course this becomes very relevant and very real. And I think one core element, and this is also what our movement is a bit about, is we need to learn to take decisions in Europe faster and, let's say, in a more democratic and easy governance way. So we need to unite and not think that we can do our separate 27 things all the time. It just doesn't work. We don't have the time. We need to change the governance, the Betriebssystem, the system of how we run.
That's exactly what Europa is out there doing as well. That's exactly what us as citizens of Europe need to be pushing for as well. And as the startuppers, the founders, the investors, hopefully preparing to make quick decisions and move on once these things happen. Thank you so much to you both. Thank you.
Good.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah.